Somebody wants to.
I am mildly sorry for the mildly cursed cosplay I'm about to bring into this world. So I had this moment recently looking at a post from Sunset Dragon, who creates these beautiful designs based on movies or anime or video games. And I saw this Shrek design, which made me think, huh, that's funny. Wouldn't that be so fun to make? That would be so fun to make. Oh no. And so, now we're here. Hello, I'm Miss Twisted. You guys can call me Charlotte. I do crafting, cosplay, and other weird and whimsical stuff. And I guess I was in the mood to make something silly. So it's Shrek. Yassified Shrek, sexy Shrek, pin-up Shrek, whatever you want to call it. All I can say is I've ruined my search history looking for inspiration for this one. Okay, super quick breakdown. I've ordered some boots and gloves, but most other stuff I've got around the house. I'm gonna make these funky leggings, cute little skirt, this shirt with gigantic sleeves, a sort of corset bodice type thing, a handful of accessories like the ears, belt, collar, and decorative belt onions, which is not a phrase I ever imagined saying. Now this whole project had me making some really bizarre searches, nothing too concerning, but did get me thinking about exactly how exposed you might be online. And that's where CyberGhost VPN, this video's sponsor, really comes in. Let's be real, the internet is full of shady sites and trackers, so online safety is more important than ever. That's why you need a solid VPN, so huge thanks to CyberGhost for sponsoring this video. CyberGhost routes your traffic through a secure encrypted tunnel, keeping your IP hidden and your data private. Just turn on CyberGhost VPN before you browse. It encrypts and reroutes 100% of your traffic through their secure servers, so no one will even know about your online activity. What's more, CyberGhost VPN doesn't keep logs, so not even they themselves will know what you do online. With just a few clicks, you can change your virtual location and unlock geo-blocked content from tons of streaming services, including Netflix, Amazon Prime, and more. Or even snag better online deals or play games blocked in your region. CyberGhost works on all major platforms: Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, and even smart TVs and consoles. One subscription covers up to 7 devices, perfect for sharing with family or friends. Right now, they are offering $2.03 a month plus for 3 months. That's 84% off, along with a 45-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 support. Join over 38 million users and grab your discount via the link in the description. Stay safe out there. For now, let's get stuck into the crafting. So these are brown leggings, and I'm gonna slice these right down the side. I'm also cutting out a chunk of the fabric at this side just to make room for that green crisscross section. And for that, I've got this green stretchy knit, but it stretches in the wrong way for how much length I need, so I had to sew these two pieces together. I'm hoping once I've got the crisscrossy sections over the top, you won't really notice that seam. For those bits, I've got some scrap leather here that I'm gonna cut into strips. I could have made my life so much more easy by just buying some brown ribbon, but I'm stubborn and wanted to use up what I already had. With all of my brown spaghetti, I'm going to secure this onto the green just with a tiny little bit of a fabric glue. It's just gonna sort of hold it in place until I can get the stitches down either side. This fabric glue is non-toxic, dries really fast, and has a bit of stretch to it, so honestly it tends to be my go-to for every project. I use it a lot like a basting stitch replacement because I'm lazy, like what I'm doing here with this bias binding. For the record, that's not how you're supposed to use bias binding. That's kind of a running theme with my work, so as a general rule, you can always assume that I have no idea what I'm doing. My entire crafting philosophy boils down to trial and error, or feral crafting, or around and find out. Once that glue is dry, I am going to stitch this bias binding right along next to those crisscrosses. Taking a second to cut off the excess at the edge here, and we're gonna glue down some gold trim to the other side of this binding. On the topic of that's not how you're supposed to use that, don't use glue as a replacement for basting or like holding things in place with clips. But I happen to have a ton of anti-glue needles so it doesn't gunk up the machine, especially once I let it dry fully. Even so, there's definitely better ways to do this. So now I've got these strips ready to rumble, and the bias binding is open kind of away from this green thing because that is going to clamp onto that edge of where I've cut open the leggings. My hope is by creating like a really thick line on either side of that green, it'll kind of help sell the illusion that the green is actually like my skin rather than just like a part of the leggings, just because it's like further back from the rest of the fabric. Okay, so far so good, but I got up to about here on the leg before I realized that my sewing machine can't really fit like into here comfortably to get this bit sewn on because it's a tube, right? So I think I'm just gonna like split this part of the inner seam so that I can get this on a flat surface to sew up this last little bit. Basically, this legging area here kind of has to sit flat as I sew it, but the inseam here I can sew back together by basically just putting the right sides together and just sewing down. Okay. Taking these for a quick test drive, everything is fitting nicely, it's moving nicely. I'm really glad that I used like the stretchiest fabrics I could for most of this. It's just already way more comfortable than a lot of cosplay things I've made. Moving on up to the skirt. For this part, no measurement, only vibes. I've just sort of guesstimated some vaguely petal shapes on some calico, and I'm gonna sew them together along the top edge here. You can see I went for a little bit of a curve at the end there, but it gave me like a flicked up like pixie shape, and so I ended up simplifying this shape a lot more. A little bit more asymmetrical than the concept art, I think, but I'm happy with these shapes after a little bit of fiddling. I've added an extra layer here, pun definitely intended, basically just to make sure that I'm covered at the back here. I just don't have a butt sticking out, even though my legs are going to be covered with leggings. Initially, I was planning on using some of my good linen for this costume, but I think I can just use the exact calico, so this mock-up is now the final product. This faux leather is going to form a border for each of my calico pieces, and rather than trying to do like a bias binding for something so thick and a weird shape, I'm gonna kind of like cut out the shape that I need and just fold both edges in, kind of like a giant applique. Luckily, this stuff just does not fray at all, so I only really have to do a single fold rather than like a double fold here. Once again, gluing and stitching this to the front of each calico piece, and I left enough room on the bottom of this piece so that that can fold under and enclose the raw edge of the calico on the inside. So that calico is not gonna fray. It just won't look that pretty from the inside, but just don't look at the inside of the skirt, it's fine. For all of that beautiful patterning along the outside of the skirt, I had the genius idea of drawing this on in permanent marker, which is definitely not a decision that's going to come back to bite me later on. Now my plan is to use my drawings as a guide for where I put the gold work, and gold work is basically like doing hand embroidery and couching on a bunch of like glittery gold wire to make some really cool embroidered lines, literally using stuff like this. Traditionally, I believe they use real gold wire. This stuff is obviously just like some sort of fake alternative metal, and how that works is it's literally just like a tiny little piece which is actually a coil. Like if you stretch it, you can see that it is literally just a coil of this gold colored metal. I have a ton of this stuff because I just really wanted to try it after seeing it in a couple of people's cosplays, but I also know that this is really time consuming, so I wanted to employ a kind of cheat way of doing it, which is, once again, using my fabric glue in ways it was not meant to be used. Basically, I'm going to make sure these are well covered and glued on and use some tacking stitches later to secure them. This was definitely easier said than done. It's actually really hard to manipulate the wire like this without it like uncoiling itself, but damn, the effect is so lovely when it's done. Okay, now we're really getting somewhere, guys. This looks kind of good, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm really happy with how that gold work looks. What I am feeling is that it's still a little bit too light, so I'm gonna try and coffee stain some of this fabric. So we're heating a big old pot on the stove with some cheap instant coffee. Now that is some good soup. I'm ever so gently going to submerge this in the coffee for a minute or two, and then the carefulest hand wash I've ever done. And that coffee is not as hot as it looks. I let it cool down a little bit once the coffee had dissolved. It's just steaming a lot because, well, it's Melbourne in winter, so it's just as cold inside as it is outside, because we live in glorified cardboard boxes. While the skirt's drying, I've got some foam clay out to make the ears. Starting out with this sausage shape, squishing that down at the base here, and sort of vaguely shaping the top until it resembles Shrek's ears. I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm not great at sculpting, but I only really need it to be close enough. In hindsight, these really should have had some sort of stable core because they just kept falling over as I'm working with them. Eventually, I had the big brain moment of putting a skewer in each of these to hold them steady, which also meant priming and painting these the next day much easier. Now, I just got back from the garage because I went out there while it was still sunny in the sky, and I spent like 5 minutes looking to see if I had a green spray paint. I did, by the way, so I didn't have to buy anything else to get the perfect shade of Shrek green on the ears, and I'm really sorry for using the phrase Shrek green. I have a feeling it's not the last time I'm going to use it in this project. Anyway, after about 5 minutes, I went to come back inside and it just started aggressively pouring down, and then 30 seconds later, aggressively hailing. But for anyone wondering what it's like living in Melbourne, That's what it's like. In other news, the coffee staining worked, well, surprisingly well. In fact, if I put this up like next to the original color, you can see the color difference is really dramatic. Usually with coffee staining, I struggle to get it as dark as I want, and in fact, this is darker than I wanted. Plus, I was hoping that the coffee stain would help disguise some of that ugly yellow marker. Instead, it's kind of just bled out and like left that marker in like a halo shape around all of that gold work, so it's made it worse. And thirdly, a lot of that gold work is now coming off. It just did not survive that, and that really made me angry because like this is supposed to be machine washable glue, and I know that this needed tacking stitches, but I expected to survive like a very gentle dunking into some warm coffee. So overall, not good news for these. I really don't want to have to remake them, so I'm gonna try just putting these in the washing machine, like maybe chuck it in one of those delicate bags so I don't completely lose any of this gold work that comes off. See if I can like lighten that coffee staining and see if it helps at all with that weird bleeding of the permanent marker, because oh man, I really don't want to have to remake that. Alright, so let's wash these and paint these. At this stage, I expected some of that gold work to come loose, but my hope was the tacking stitches would hold most of it in place. In the meantime, I'm not going super crazy with painting the ears. I just wanted to get a couple of like highlights and shading in there. Just trying to make the whole thing look organic, as these are quite a radioactive green. Alright, skirt's been through the wash. Let's see the damage. Oh, yep, Yep, so all of the gold wire, a bunch of it has now like decoiled. Oh, that's devastating though. All right, I need a minute. I'm gonna put this aside and I'm gonna remake this later on because I need like some mental distance from that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the shirt. For that, I'm gonna use this shirt here. It's kind of like my base pattern that I'm gonna copy for pretty much everything up to the sleeves. I'm very roughly tracing the panels of this shirt. I don't really need it to be like a full-on properly fitted pattern because it doesn't really need to fit all that well. Most of it's going to get stuffed into the corset. It's really only the collar and the sleeves that I'm worried about. Okay, mock-up number one. I can't show you this on because it's too tight. It does not close at the front, but the shapes are all fine. So I'm going to remake this one with some larger panels, and I've changed my mind about using the calico for the shirt. I'm going to stick with this like softer, drapier linen because I think it's just going to conform to my shape a little bit better. So this second round was all the same shapes, but with like maybe a centimeter wider on each panel. And this time sewing them together, I'm doing some flat felled seams because I don't own an overlocker and this stuff frays a lot. I'm not going to try and explain seams to you guys. I barely know what I'm doing. For that one, you're better off finding a tutorial from someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Okay, I think we've got it. A bit of a brave choice for me to go straight for the final product rather than doing a second mock-up, but it's better than my usual track record, which is no mock-up and just fuck around and find out and hope for the best. I've kept this brown thread on even some of these lighter garments just because I kind of like the visible thread. So just because it's fun, I'm just going ham and adding all of these lines onto the collar. It kind of reminds me of like the stripes that you find on onions. Moving on to the sleeves, and for this I've got that same ultra wide sleeve block that I used for my puffy sleeves in my last video for the Jester. This time I'm combining the ruffled puffy sleeve element with those pleated sleeves that I used on the other sleeve for the Jester, because I want those beautiful slashes of Shrek green to show through on the sleeve. And since this costume is just delightfully unserious, I want those sleeves to be comically oversized. My lovely sleeve block in the calico fabric is going to get cut down into strips until I've got 8 mostly evenly spaced pieces. All of these are getting hemmed just with a single fold for now, and I've done exactly the same thing to this green sateen that's going to get sewn in between. And I didn't even rehearse that rhyme, that just happened naturally. I'm so proud of myself. With my new ultra long sleeve piece, I'm folding that green piece in so that the 2 beige pieces are touching and just sewing along that line, and I'm kind of very gently ruffling this as I go just to bring in some of that extra volume. And just before I sew this in, I've cut a second piece of sleeve, this time with no ruffle, just a regular sleeve shape. This is getting sewn into the shirt base too to form the lining inside the puff sleeve, and it's slightly shorter than the puff sleeve so that when you sew the other 2 ends together, it holds the puff sleeve more puffed. You can watch my old Jester video for a better explanation for this. And finally, the lower part of the sleeve is just a tube of fabric with the ends hemmed. That tube is getting sewn directly onto the bottom of the puff sleeve, and we're going to cover that remaining raw edge with some pretty gold trim. Okay, tell me these sleeves aren't absolutely fantastic. Like, look at the size of these things. And that's without like any stuffing. But speaking of which, I am gonna try and put some like tulle or something in here to just make them even more comically large. And for the tulle, I have this tutu, which they sent me the wrong color and they didn't want it back. So I just have all of this tulle that I'm not really going to use. So I'm probably just going to cut this thing in half and stuff all of this tulle into both of these. So let's see how that looks. So I've cut the lining off here and cut this skirt in half. And turning my sleeve back inside out, I'm going to take apart this middle seam here for the lining. That's not going to disrupt the shape at all, but it is just going to give me an opening to stuff that tulle into. This was a weird and unpleasant sensation, like stuffing a donut-shaped pillow with sandpaper, but the poofiness was so worth it. I just sort of tried to move it around a little bit from the outside to make that shape nice and even. Done. Perfect. No notes. They literally just look like big old green and brown onions on my arms. I'm having so much fun, guys. The ears are good to go, and my plan is to attach them directly into the wig. Now for the wig, I really didn't want to have to buy a new one. I've got plenty of wigs, but the only one in like a green that I have is this one. And it is so matted and tangled. But again, I really don't want to have to buy a new one. So I'm going to try and detangle this one a little bit. I really don't want to. I hate wigs so much. All right, let's do this. Truthfully, I'm not sure if there's any additional commentary I can offer here. I'm pretty sure my face throughout this whole process clearly shows how much fun I'm having. Things did get a little tiny bit easier once I remembered that I bought an actual wig mannequin for this instead of these stupid flimsy foam ones that keep falling over. I realized it might be a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't enjoy the wigs, therefore they don't turn out that good, and they don't turn out that good, therefore I don't start enjoying them. With the wig steamed, detangled, and cut into some layers, I'm trying to MacGyver like some foam rollers by using this cardboard tube, some scissors to hold it because I can't find my pliers, and a steamer. I actually think if I had the patience, this method might have actually worked quite well. I want to yet again reiterate to you all that I'm having a terrible time. I really hate wigs, okay? Also, this method was kind of stupid, but I'm too stubborn to go and buy actual equipment for this one. What I do have that I'd forgotten about until now is this. It's a curling iron. It doesn't work, but I have one. I originally got this back when I was a teenager, and none of us with curly hair knew how to use curly hair, so I would literally straighten my hair and then recurl it with this, so it would be all of these weird like artificial curls, which I guess were the fashion of that time. Anyway, like I said, this doesn't work, so it's not plugged in, but I can combine this with the steamer, so you can clip it, roll it to the end, roll it up like that, and then get a steamer on it while I'm rolling that up. Give that a moment, give that a second to cool down slowly. And then it sort of gives me a little bit of a curl here. So I'm slowly doing that around all of these, so they have these weird sort of barrel curl things. But honestly, my point here is just to give it a little bit of texture and wave when I brush it out, I guess. So continuing with this method, hating it all the while, I eventually managed to get the whole head covered and looking pretty decent. Now my foam ears I'm gluing to a piece of green fabric here just to form an extra wide base, and that whole base is getting hot glued into the wig, trying to get it onto the hair net, not just the end hair fibers. Okay. It's not terrible, it's not amazing, but it's not terrible. And that's about as much effort as I'm willing to put in on this one. Side note, you're not really supposed to hot glue things into wigs, like that's not how you're supposed to do that. But we're just going full feral crafting on this one because it's wigs, and anything I can do to shorten the amount of time I have to deal with it, I'm gonna take those shortcuts even if I regret it later. Maybe one day I'll hire someone to make me a big, glorious, sparkly, like drag queen style wig for this one. I think that would be sick, but that's for future Charlotte to worry about. I'll deal with this for now. So just as onions have layers, the layers of this outfit also has onions. I'm really pushing my luck with that saying, but I'm gonna go with it.
You get it! We both have layers.
Anyway, we've got some belt onions, I guess, to do, and for that, I've got some styrofoam balls, and my plan is literally just to stretch and glue some fabric over these. Bear with me. Trust the process. I have an idea in my head of what I think these are gonna look like. Now I've got a couple of scraps of this, which is like an ivory colored silk dupion, and I wouldn't usually waste silk on something like this, but like all of these scraps aren't really going to be useful for much else. So let's see how it goes. I know I only just started using the term feral crafting like last video. I have a feeling you guys are going to be hearing it a lot because it's just a very appropriate name for what I do. So my plan here is literally to just slowly glue and stretch this Dupion over it. Dupion doesn't really stretch, so it's sort of forming these scrunched up pleats as I go, which is kind of perfect for forming that onion texture. With the excess cut off at the bottom, I'm literally just gluing like a gold button over the outside here to hide that edge. But I'm leaving some length on the top part to scrunch together because it kind of looks exactly like the top of an onion. And for no other reason than vibes and to add some cool details, I'm gonna put some of this gold twine around the onions. But I like this enough, I formed some loops that are glued and pinned in to hang them off. Okay, I can't believe how well that worked. I think I just earned some karma from the gold work disaster of the skirt, because look at how good these onions look, damn! For my collar piece, I've just sort of guesstimated the shape on some paper, which I'm then cutting out of some leather. This stuff is 3mm thick, so it's thick enough it'll hold its shape really nicely, but you can soften it in warm water to make it nice and malleable. Check the juniper cameo on the mug, and once this whole piece is soaking, it should be nice and soft and easy for me to shape. My first thought was to hold this against my neck to shape it, but then I realized I don't want damp leather against my skin for hours, so I switched to a mannequin instead, which I really should have thought of earlier. I wanted a little bit of texture on this thing, so I'm using a leather carving tool, which is, again, not quite how you're supposed to use this one, but I'm just going to use it to indent some lines along here. Once that leather has fully dried, you can see it holds its shape and those indentations really nicely. Continuing my theme for this video of that's not how you do that, this is not exactly how you're supposed to use leather dye. This is probably far too much on my little sponge thing. Not that I minded too much, I just really find working with leather dye so satisfying, the way it soaks in and changes the color of that leather so quickly to this beautiful rich brown. Next, we're breaking out my favorite cosplay tool to do a bunch of hole punching. I've said it before in previous videos, you're gonna hear me say it again, I love this press so much. Now with the right die sets, this thing can press in rivets as well, but for this thing, I'm going to use a good old-fashioned hammer just because sometimes it's really satisfying to have an excuse to just whack something. I've threaded the rivet through the front here. There's a little back piece that just sort of clips on there temporarily. This little doohickey goes over the top because it's slightly curved under here to keep the curve of the rivet. And then the best. And then you've got a lovely neat rivet that is now fully encased in that leather. All right, I've got all of the rest of the rivets in, ready to go on both sides, so let's hit some stuff. At some point, I'll put like a buckle or something on here, but for now, I'm just gonna tie it. In general, that's done. And while I've got all my equipment out, I'm going to do the same thing for a leather belt. I've got a leather belt already, it just needed some extra dye and some rivets. Good morning, my loves. I'm very tired this morning. I didn't get much sleep last night because it was so cold, but I think I used up all my ability to complain about the cold in the last video. So let's just jump into it. Where are we at? So shirt's done, tights done, necklace done, belt's done, onions that hang off the waist is done. I'm just gonna stop talking, drink my instant coffee / Milo monstrosity and get into it. So as Charlotte from the future, watching that back, I realized I never actually got to my point, which is we're finally revisiting the skirt. Now, once my failed skirt had dried, I realized it had actually gotten rid of most of that yellow halo effect from the permanent marker, and the color from the coffee staining was now much more subtle. So although the cosplay gods had smited me for my hubris in trying to cheat my way into gold work, they had showed mercy on me in not making me redo that entire skirt. My penitence was painstakingly pulling off all of that failed gold work. I've tried to keep most of the coils for something in future, and we're just gonna chalk the rest up to a learning experience. It was practice. What I opted to do instead was take basically gold twine to cover those patterns with, using the same method of gluing and tacking stitches, but with far more tacking stitches for that durability. Not to mention thick cord is automatically going to be stronger than a bunch of tiny wire. So it might not be as glittery as the gold work, but I'm pretty chuffed with how this turned out as an alternative. This is a mannequin covered in cling wrap because I'm going to use this to make my corset. As you can tell, it's not set to my size. It's quite small on the waist, but that's kind of on purpose because I want my corset to be quite small around the waist as well, so that when I want to wear it tight, I can really pull it snatched around the waist. And if I want to wear it loose and be more comfy, I can just leave a bit of a gap at the back and that's fine. As for how a mannequin covered in cling wrap is going to help me make a corset, well, if you've watched my videos before, you know where this is going. It's time for fragile tape. So what I'm actually doing is making a duct tape pattern, which is where you cover a thing in cling wrap and then duct tape, because you essentially get like a shell of that thing that you can cut into the shapes you need to cut out of fabric. Hope that makes sense. Usually you'd use duct tape for this, but I use fragile tape because I bought too much of it years ago and have been trying to use it up ever since. And I know a few of you commented that surely my fragile tape must be running low, and yeah, a little bit. This is how much I've got left. And that'll see me through the next like 8 projects, and then it's done. But to be honest, I've kind of gotten stuck on the idea, pun definitely intended, of it being like a bit of a brand identity thing. I think I've just grown attached to it. Pun not intended that time. So for those of you who get me gifts or trinkets when you see me at conventions, not the worst idea for a gift. Let's cut my bright orange duct tape pattern off my mannequin, and this shell is going to get cut into several vertical strips. These shapes will form the starting point for the corset. Okay, as I've cut these off, I just remembered that I've actually done my mock-up for the fern corset. You guys will see that stuff in a future video, but it looked really good. So what I think I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the mock-up for the fern corset, which is an underbust, so it won't work exactly, but I'm actually going to use that to make my base, and I'm still going to use this paper pattern here because I think I can use it to kind of get like this top section and see if I can like extend the pattern that I have out upwards using the duct tape pattern. I don't know if that's gonna work, but I know for a fact that this pattern here works really well on my shape. So it might actually be a really, really good starting point, and then using this because I know that it works because it's come off the mannequin. Full heads up, I'm going to completely gloss over most of the corset stuff here just because my next video is going to be pretty corset heavy. So please subscribe for that one, I guess. Okay, honestly, not bad considering I've just sort of shoved this mock-up together. It's coming together really well. I really like these little tab things forming at the bottom. I haven't fully boned this yet. I've only really got the boning right at the front and right at the back, and already it's giving me that really nice snatched waist, which is exactly what I'm after. There's a little too much gaping in the front, and I honestly think that I might be better off almost making the pattern like a straight line up with a split here, and then it's just going to gape that way anyway, rather than actually cutting a V shape out of there. I hope that makes sense. In general, I'm confident enough for this shape to get into the main corset. Round 2, I am tracing my pattern pieces onto some couture. This is a really stiff, high quality fabric that's really tightly woven. It's used a lot in corsets because it's so sturdy. Alright, to make the corset itself, I have this upholstery leather. Well, it's faux leather, but it's a pretty convincing like pattern and texture, and it's not super thick, so it should be relatively okay to work with. The only downside is not a fan of this color, but I tested out basically mixing up a bunch of fabric paint, which is like a couple of transparent dyes, some leather paints. I wanted sort of like the gray brown kind of to match Shrek's original vest sort of thing, and this is kind of the effect it has on it, which honestly I'm pretty happy with as like a texture. I think once that is like fully onto the corset, it's gonna look pretty good. The mix of fabric paint here was quite thin, but that kind of worked in my favor because it meant that it sort of pulled into some of those gaps, and I could rub it in with some tissue and it sort of formed a little bit more of that mottled texture without taking away too much of the base brown. All of my couture pieces are getting sewn to the faux leather right along the top line here because I'm going to fold this back over to form that really nice edge on the top and then flatline the rest of these pieces together, which is sewing along the sides, wrong sides together. So all of my pieces here I'm going to sew together with that raw edge showing on the outside of the corset because I'm going to use those as boning channels. I immediately regretted this because that faux leather is really thick, so I had to like zigzag stitch along each of these lines to try and get that seam sitting flat enough, and they were still sitting weird enough I decided against using these sections as boning channels anyway. I always love doing the lacing panel section because I get to use my grommet press again. The middle piece I decided to split into 2 separate pieces that were basically bag lines, so sewn to the couture right sides together so you could turn the whole thing inside out. So I went to go press my seams with the iron, and I wasn't pressing super hard, like I wanted to sort of slowly push it down to see how the fabric would react, and it just kind of like instantly disintegrated, literally like a couple of millimeters away from the fabric. I've never seen fabric just destroy itself so fast. That's really annoying, but I guess I have to remake this piece. Looking at that front section, I have a busk. Like, I bought a packet of several busks that I could use, so I can make that corset close and open at the front, which will make my life so much easier. So when I remake them, I'm going to do that. So while I'm remaking this front section, I'm going to sew along the edge here, but leave a gap for each of these little tabs. That way, when you turn the fabric back inside out, you can shove those tabs through those gaps and have them poke out on this side. I need you all to know that, like, I have this craft explosion every single evening, so I spend a lot of time cleaning up instead of doing the correct thing, which is just cleaning up as you go. Getting the bust panel sewn in and sewn onto the rest of the corset, and this one's at least structurally ready to rumble. I'm really regretting using this stuff, guys, and it's not because, like, you shouldn't try and use secondhand stuff, but this particular one, like, as I work with it, I'm starting to realize just how flimsy this stuff is. The one good thing about that is I've realized that you can just peel this front, like, pattern section off this, like, backing bit, which gives it structure, which means that you could essentially pull off this one really thin, like, piece with that texture, and I'm going to use that to cover up all of these like weird front-facing seams that I've created. Of course, the discovery of this stuff being really flimsy does not bode super well for like the longevity of this corset, but for now we can at least cover up these weird ugly front seams. After the skirt fiasco, I don't entirely trust this glue alone, so I am going to sew these down on either side as well. And so my boning channels are pretty much going to sit either side of most of these seams. My boning for this one is a combination of synthetic whalebone and zip ties, because I didn't have enough of the synthetic whalebone to finish this whole corset. Look, I went into this project with absolutely no plan, and that has its downsides. Okay, let's try this baby on and see how it holds up. Okay, all right. You know what? I really don't hate that. That's a pretty damn good fit, considering, like, I'm really not trying very hard or spending a lot of time on this. I thought I was making this with, like, tons of room, and I've already basically got that all the way done up with no more room, and I would have liked to have pulled this in a little bit more. I'm not going to try and muck around with that. So we've got 3 minor downsides to this corset. 1, it's a little bit too big. 2, it's made of some very flimsy stuff that may not last very long. We're just gonna have to deal with that when it comes to it. And 3, I did not think about the fact that I'm going to have this stark white busk at the front here, and I don't want it to be like a bunch of white bits showing at the front, so I might try and paint these or something. I don't know, we'll work that out. For now, I want to put some binding on the bottom here, and then this one's good to go. Okay, corset done. The bottom edge here, I've basically just covered in a bunch of bias binding, and then covered that bias binding in some of this trim, which I believe is called a gimp trim. Also, the busk is now brown. Leather dye apparently worked really well on what I can only assume is like white enamel. I was not expecting that to stick and color that so well. I thought I would have to like cover this in fabric or something. So, well, that's one less thing for me to worry about. So with that done, there are 2 more things I need to worry about. One of them is gloves and one of them is boots. The gloves, I was waiting on these to arrive in the mail. I've cut the fingers off them because they're actually just like way too large for my hand. Like, this is where my fingers stop on these, so they just look a little bit oversized. This does mean that I'm gonna have to paint my fingers green, but I think it's gonna be better than a comically oversized glove. The boots are looking pretty good. I might take to these with some leather dye as well, just to add some extra texture, and I think that's good to go. The gloves are getting an extra cuff, and because I was still a little bit salty about not being able to use my gold work, I'm adding it into the gloves instead. This time with way more tacking stitches, and I'm not gonna be like chucking this in the wash. These pieces are getting folded and hemmed in at the bottom here. The same on the sides and top. That's getting glued and sewn to the wrist of the glove. And to make it nice and easy to get this bit on and off, I'm just gonna add a snap fastener on the bottom here. These usually come in packs or kits, and they're pretty like self-explanatory for how to use. I really am a big fan of these. So I had a wonderful big brain moment when I was finishing off the gloves that I don't have to paint my fingers green. I have some old stockings that are the perfect shade of Shrek green. So I've cut these stockings flat and traced my hand, and I'm gonna sew these two pieces together along those lines using a stretch stitch. Damn. I think my brain was getting confused between straight stitch and stretch stitch, which are really hard things to say anyway. These tights I actually had in my drawer for like 6 years for a Ford cosplay that I never made, and I'm kinda glad I forgot about them until now, otherwise I might have used them in the leggings instead. Anywho, we are tearing away that tearaway stabilizer and then cutting off that excess. And the best thing about using this ultra stretchy nylon material is even though it's a pain in the butt to sew, it's so stretchy that it's really forgiving if you make them too small or too large. Okay, before I try these on, I'm gonna put some masking tape over my nails and you'll see why in just a moment. Luckily, these are fitting pretty good first time. So now I'm going to use some nail glue to glue these green fake nails directly to the gloves. And now you can understand why I've got the tape underneath the gloves to protect my fingernails. The color looks a little flat. Under the gloves, it's really not too noticeable. And if you remove these carefully enough, those nails stay stuck to the gloves and not your hands. Good morning, folks. Okay, so last night I finished off the corset, the boots, and the gloves, and that pretty much means that we're finished. I also did an extra step last night. I was just not happy with the wig, so I've basically bought a whole second wig and just attached all of those wefts in there. And yes, I realized the whole point of me using that old wig was so I didn't have to buy a new wig, but I just really wanted that beautiful princess style length. And considering how poorly I've constructed this, it doesn't actually look that bad. From the front, from 5 meters away. I just need to kind of try everything on together and see if it needs touch-ups. Okay, you guys, I can just about fit my whole body in from this angle here. And look at how good this looks. I'm ecstatic right now, like, because I haven't actually seen most of this stuff on at all until now, and I'm incredibly happy with it. Like, I'm not even sure if it's giving Shrek right now. I think it will by the time I get, like, the head with the ears and the body paint on, but, like, it's unironically, like, really good. Okay, rapid fire round of last minute additions. I'm using some brown fabric paint here to paint in some lines, really leaning into those onion textures. Don't worry, a lot of this stuff goes on a lot darker than it dries. I redid the ears to be a little bit bigger and a different shape. The corset got the most changes with a bit of a brown wash of fabric paint to get a darker color, and I wanted some more visible scaly texture, much like the concept art and Shrek's original vest. So I've cut out a ton of these little scales out of my faux leather, and I'm just sort of gluing them around the place. Just the top and bottom, away from anywhere that's going to be strained or rubbed against anything. And finally, a very light brushing of that fabric paint for some more texture. Good morning, folks. It is the day of the shoot, which means it's time for makeup. For that, I've got this stuff here, which is airbrush makeup, and I keep this airbrush separated just for makeup. Safety first, as always, guys. I do not want to be using any airbrush that has used regular paint on my skin. Now, I'm pretty sure this is like the first time I've done this in over a year, so I felt a little bit out of practice. You can see it's not exactly going on evenly. Airbrush body paints can be a little bit tricky to get right, but it goes on so fast, and if you're good at it, you can achieve a very smooth result. Plus, this one is alcohol based, so it stays on really well and just does not smudge. Adding powder over the top is not usually a step I'd take, but I'm just trying to even out the color a little bit and add some highlight. Combining this with some dark green eyeshadow as a sort of contour, and it seemed to work pretty well. As long as you don't look too closely, you can't even see my blotchy paint job. We are going sharp eyebrows, some dramatic eyes, and of course glittery freckles across the cheeks. Okay, I think I'm happy with that for the makeup. Aside from the lips, which I'll do after eating some food, just before I get in the car to go. At the very least, I did remember to fill up my car yesterday, so I don't have to get petrol while I'm green. I have learned that the hard way before. Look at this. The whole bottom area beneath my lip is just not there because of course I'm angling everything from here. It's so silly. Luckily I was able to correct my naked chin by just sponging on a little bit of that airbrush makeup. Some luscious lips as the last step and we are good to go. Look at this. Look at this makeup with this hair and with the ears. And look at this. Look at the boots. Exactly what I had in mind. I am so happy with how this turned out. Just This one is getting on to some conventions. Also, do you guys like my little neon green slime cocktail I made? It actually smells really drinkable because there's some apple flavored cordial because I couldn't find some green food dye, but there's also a bunch of very non-edible stuff in here. So I'm gonna resist the forbidden juice. This cosplay is definitely the closest I've come to a drag queen kind of vibe, and I'm kind of loving it. I feel kind of like fierce and powerful, and I can't believe I'm getting that from a silly Shrek cosplay. Also, mad props to Flavor Forge Photography who I'm shooting with. I can't believe how good these images turned out. So I'm not usually in the habit of doing my outros directly after a photo shoot, but come on, I'm green. I kinda had to. What can I say, guys? This was supposed to be a very quick, fun, almost a joke costume, and I just got totally carried away, and I regret nothing. It was so worth it. Much like Sunset Dragon's original art, we took a very silly concept and just did it in earnest. Hey, Charlotte from the future here. Sorry I'm not green for this bit, but there are two very quick things I want to mention before the video finishes. Firstly, I am coming to Perth for Pixel Expo next month, and I am so excited. Pixel is going to be huge. My fellow guests are Soylent Cosplay, Vera Chimera, Little Gem, and Iron Mouse. That is so cool. For my West Coast Aussies, I hope to see you there. The other thing I wanted to mention is I'm really disappointed in myself that I didn't use the Simpsons reference, and then I tied none into my belt.
Which was the style at the time.
Because it's so specific, and I'm never going to get the chance to have such a niche reference ever again. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. Thank you again to CyberGhost VPN for sponsoring this one. Click the link in the description below to get 84% off now and 4 months free. It's risk-free with a 45-day money-back guarantee. A huge thank you to my ultimate supporters on Patreon: Artemis, Earl Monsivial Erno, Joshua, Michael, Mohican Creates, Mix Ranvi, Residual Images, Tamara, Vera Lynn, and Yuri, and Robert Mischief. Sorry I'm not green for your one. Thank you also to these other incredible Patreon members who are on screen now. If you'd like to join us over on Patreon, I post previews, work in progress, and sometimes entirely exclusive mini videos that are only for Patreon supporters. Occasionally, I even give away some of the cool stuff I've created, like I recently ran a competition for this Harlequin hood. Plus, joining over there is the best way that you can support me so I can keep making ridiculous projects like this. But just by being here, watching this video, liking, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff that keep the YouTube robots happy, you are supporting me. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!